Hello, my name is Saviour Robert, coming to you live from Uyo, the capital city of Akwa Ibom State. A very good evening to you. And today on World View, Nicola Sturgeon confirms she is resigning as Scotland's First Minister after more than 8 years in the role. Russian journalist Maria Ponomarenko jailed for 6 years for posting on social media about the deadly attack by Russian warplanes on a theater in Ukraine. Now, at least 4 people, including a child, dead in devastation of Cyclone Gabrielle, which has caused significant flooding and landslides across New Zealand. Details of these stories and more in a moment. First, on Worldview today, Nicola Sturgeon has confirmed she is resigning as Scotland's First Minister after more than 8 years in the role. The Scottish National Party leader said she knew in her head and in her heart this was the right time to step down. Sturgeon said she would remain in office until her successor was elected. And she is the longest-serving First Minister and the first woman to hold the position. Sturgeon insisted her resignation was not in response to the latest period of pressure, which has included controversies over gender reforms, trans prisoners, and the strategy on independence. She acknowledged there had been choppy waters, but said her decision had come from a deeper and longer-term assessment.
To step down as First Minister and leader of my party. If this was just a question of my ability or my resilience to get through the latest period of pressure, I wouldn't be standing here today, but it's not. This decision comes from a deeper and longer term assessment. I know it might seem sudden, but I have been wrestling with it, albeit with oscillating levels of intensity for some weeks. Essentially, I've been trying to answer 2 questions. Is carrying on right for me? And more importantly, is me carrying on right for the country, for my party?
Away from that now, at least 73 migrants are missing and presumed dead after their boat sank off the Libyan coast. This according to the UN's International Organization for Migration, IOM. Only 7 people survived Tuesday's shipwreck, but are in extremely dire conditions in hospital. And so far, 11 bodies have reportedly been recovered by the Libyan Red Crescent and police. The boat was heading to Europe on a route the IOM has called the world's deadliest migratory sea crossing. More than 130 people have already died this year, making the dangerous journey over the Mediterranean Sea. The IOM added that more than 1,450 deaths were recorded by its Missing Migrants project last year. In a separate development now, New Zealand officials say at least 4 people, including a child, have died in the devastation of Cyclone Gabrielle, which has caused significant flooding and landslides across the North Island. On Wednesday, officials confirmed a child's body was found in Hurgs Bay, one of the worst affected regions. Rescue helicopters there had rescued about 300 people stranded on rooftops. Meanwhile, a magnitude 6.0 earthquake was widely felt across the country late on Wednesday, and there were no immediate reports of damage or casualties from the quake, which struck off the coast of the North Island near the capital, Wellington. The cyclone has moved away from New Zealand, but about 10,500 people were still displaced on Wednesday. Away from that now, an orphaned Syrian baby born under the rubble of her collapsed home after last week's earthquake has been moved to a safe location by a health authority. The Afrin Health Directorate reportedly took the precautionary measure to protect the girl, Aya, from possible kidnapping and adoption fraud. On Monday, there was a violent incident at the hospital in the opposition-held region where she was being treated. A male nurse, accompanied by 2 armed men, allegedly beat the manager. Now, the head of the health directorate, Dr. Ahmed Haj Hassan, denied claims on social media that it was a foiled attempt to kidnap Aya. Now, thousands of people offered to adopt the baby last week after her story was widely reported by local and international media. However, the health directorate is determined to prioritize her welfare and act cautiously with the adoption process. Aya's mother went into labor soon after their family home in the town of Jidariz was destroyed by the 7.8 magnitude earthquake that struck southern Turkey on 6th February. She died after giving birth to Aya, who was still connected by her umbilical cord when she was found by rescuers. Now, dramatic footage shared on social media showed a man carrying the baby covered in dust after she was pulled from debris. A former United States ambassador to the United Nations, Nikki Haley, has announced she will run for president in the 2024 election, becoming the second Republican to seek the party's nomination after former President Donald Trump announced his bid last year. Haley made the announcement in a video posted online on Tuesday, describing herself as the proud daughter of Indian immigrants who grew up in the U.S. South. In the video, Haley made passing reference to her time as the top envoy to the UN under Trump, during which she spearheaded Trump's combative America First approach to international politics. She also focused on her tenure as governor of conservative-dominated South Carolina from 2011 through 2017. The announcement represented an about-turn from Haley, who said in 2021 that she would not run for president if Trump announced a 2024 bid. Away from that now, Russian journalist Maria Ponomarenko has been jailed for 6 years for posting on social media about a deadly attack by Russian warplanes on a theater in Ukraine. The court in Brno in Siberia found her guilty of reportedly spreading fake news on the laws introduced aimed at stifling dissent about the invasion of Ukraine. She was also barred from activities as a journalist for 5 years. A separate development now, the 3 people killed in a shooting at Michigan State University, including a 19-year-old aspiring surgeon and an athlete studying biology. Their identities were released by police on Tuesday. 5 others who were injured in Monday night's attack remain in a critical condition. Police said all of the victims were students of the university. Reports further say Ariel Diamond Anderson, one of the victims aged 19, had dreams of becoming a pediatric surgeon. Well, Canadian authorities have announced new restrictions on research grants designed to block funding for projects that include researchers affiliated with institutions with ties to foreign governments that pose a risk to national security. Industry Minister François-Philippe Champagne and Health Minister Jean-Yves Duclos have instructed federal grant-making officials and an innovation fund to institute new limitations on researchers seeking research investments. The announcement comes months after Canada launched a $2.3 billion Canadian dollar Indo-Pacific strategy to boost military and cybersecurity in the region. Now, Canada also said it would tighten foreign investment rules to protect intellectual property and prevent Chinese state-owned enterprises from snapping up critical mineral supplies. Away from that now, thousands of people in the South American nation of Colombia have taken to the streets to rally. The president presented his health care plan before Colombia's Congress on Monday, introducing initiatives that include greater access, increased pay for health workers, and subsidies for the poor and elderly. The proposal is expected to face opposition from conservative legislators who have argued that the reforms are too risky. Petro's push for expanded health care access fits into his larger platform of reducing poverty and economic inequality in Colombia, where he was elected last June as the first leftist president in the country's history. Away from that, 8 Croatians facing child trafficking charges in Zambia were granted bail on Tuesday following their rearrest last week while trying to leave the southern African nation. The charges allege that on December 7 last year, the 4 couples acted together with a Zambian immigration official to try to traffic 4 children from the neighboring Democratic Republic of the Congo. The group said they legally adopted the children aged between 1 and 3 years, but Zambian authorities have accused them of trafficking the minors. The prosecution had opposed the bail application, arguing that the 8 were flight risks, but Magistrate Jennifer Boalia said nothing excluded them from seeking bail if all conditions were met. They were ordered to pay 20,000 kwacha, about $1,000 each in bail fees, and offer 2 sureties from reputable organizations. The trial is set to commence on March 1. Now, nothing has been said in court about the whereabouts or status of the children. After the break, we have reports on how a U.S. man who spent nearly 28 years behind bars for a murder he has always denied committing has had the conviction overturned in Missouri. Do stay with us for details on this and more right after the break.
One truth not often told is about the transformation that Africa has undergone in recent decades. Africa is shaping its own destiny and should be referred to as the African opportunity. On Spotlight Africa, we paint the African picture the African way, laced with truth, detail, and the color of the African continent. Join Uyai Anyekan every Tuesday and Thursdays at 4:30 p.m. Spotlight Africa, telling the African story.
Many thanks for staying tuned. Now, China will resume short-term visas for travelers from South Korea after Seoul scrapped pandemic-related travel restrictions that angered Beijing. The Chinese embassy in Seoul said in a post on its official WeChat account on Wednesday that China will begin processing short-term visas for South Koreans for business, transit, and other private affairs from Saturday. Now, China stopped issuing short-term visas to South Koreans in January after Seoul slapped COVID restrictions on travelers from China amid concerns Beijing's sudden dismantling of its controversial zero-COVID policy could spawn new coronavirus variants. The South Korean government began issuing visas last week amid reports China's wave of COVID infections had peaked, after previously indicating it would restrict visas until the end of February. Now, China's foreign ministry at the time called South Korea's move a step in the right direction to facilitate people-to-people exchanges between the two countries. Now, more than a dozen countries, including Japan, South Korea, and the United States, introduced travel restrictions on arrivals from China after Beijing scrapped lockdowns, mass testing, and quarantined following rare mass protests late last year. Meanwhile, Chinese leader Xi Jinping expressed support for Iran during a visit to China by President Ibrahim Raisi as Tehran tries to expand relations with Beijing and Moscow to offset Western sanctions over its nuclear development. Xi said in a statement carried by Chinese state TV on its website on Tuesday that China supports Iran in safeguarding national sovereignty and resisting unilateralism and bullying. His comments came as China hosted Raisi on his first state visit to the Asian economic giant and the first by an Iranian president in 20 years. Xi called for a proper resolution to the Iran nuclear issue as he expressed Beijing's solidarity with Iran amid global uncertainty. In the meantime, Japan has warned China that violations of its airspace by surveillance balloons were totally unacceptable as new information emerged that unidentified aerial objects that had entered Japanese airspace in recent years were likely Chinese spy balloon flights. Japan's Defense Ministry said on Tuesday that it strongly suspects Chinese surveillance balloons had entered Japanese territory at least 3 times since 2019. The ministry also said that it had strongly demanded China's government confirm the facts of the incident and that such a situation not occur again in the future. Japan's government is now considering relaxing requirements on the use of weapons by its armed forces in order to defend against intrusions of its airspace. The Kyodo news agency reported this on Wednesday. In a related development, the White House has said there is no indication 3 flying objects blasted out of the sky over the weekend by the U.S. military are linked to alleged Chinese spying. Spokesman John Kirby said the objects may be tied to commercial or research entities and therefore benign. U.S. and Canadian officials have not yet located or recovered any wreckage from the 3 downed aircraft. Beijing earlier accused the U.S. of a trigger-happy overreaction. China has denied one of its balloons, which was destroyed by a U.S. fighter jet earlier this month off South Carolina, was being used for espionage, saying it was merely a weather monitoring airship that had blown off course. At Tuesday's daily news conference, Kirby said it will be difficult to determine the purpose or origin of the 3 other objects that were destroyed over Alaska, Canada, and Michigan until the debris is found and analyzed. In a separate story now, a U.S. man who spent nearly 28 years behind bars for a murder he has always denied committing has had the conviction overturned in Missouri. Lamar Johnson, aged 50, walked out of the St. Louis's courtroom a free man after a ruling by Judge David Mason on Tuesday. The judge said he acted after 2 witnesses had provided clear and convincing evidence that Johnson was innocent. He had been convicted of murdering Marcus Boyd in 1994. Johnson was visibly moved when the ruling was announced, while his supporters started cheering and applauding. Last year, attorney Kim Gardner had filed a motion seeking the release of Johnson after conducting an investigation together with the Innocence Project nonprofit legal organization. Following Tuesday's hearing, Johnson's legal team criticized the office of the state attorney general, which had pushed to keep him in prison. A spokesperson for the attorney general said in an email that the office will take no further action in the case. Still in the U.S. now, air safety of the Pacific Ocean. Reports say United Airlines Flight 1722 had left at just 775 feet in altitude and went on to land safely in San Francisco 27 minutes normally until 71 seconds after takeoff from Kahului Airport to help curb soaring costs for the country's most vulnerable people, with a focus on banks and communities to tackle cost of living pressures. Yoon's office said the president ordered measures to boost competition in the banking and communication services sectors during the closed-door part of the meeting. At the same time, the government concerns raised in the media about their big profits and generous retirement payouts. In a separate business story now, Tesla's electric car maker to charity last year. The donation of 11.6 million shares was described in a filing with U.S. regulators as today. Musk said that towards the end of this year would be a good time to find someone to succeed him as the chief executive in December last year. And finally, on Worldview today, Dave Hollis' former ex-wife, best-selling author Rachel Hollis, said the family was devastated. A family spokesperson told U.S. Issues. He reportedly died peacefully on Saturday night at his home near Austin, Texas in 2018 to join his ex-wife in her work ventures. During his time at Disney, Hollis. With that, we wrap up our package for you on Worldview today. Do ensure to follow us on social media and subscribe to our YouTube channel, all of which you can find on our website. spectrumtv.ng. Do enjoy the rest of your day. Bye for now.